Hi everyone, I'm Tayo Amos. I am an alum of the MFA production program, um, and I'm so excited to be here talking to Rick Famuyiwa,
There we
Nigerian.
go.
I was like, yes, Nigerian love right here. Um, I think it'd be great. I mean, I would love to read your bio if that's okay with you.
Oh, please, please.
Um, yeah, because I feel like you don't need an introduction, but just for everyone else. Here we go. All right. So, Rick Famuyiwa is an alumnus of the USC School of Cinematic Arts and the Sundance Institute Screenwriters and Directors Labs. His movie Dope premiered at the 2015 Sundance Film Festival, winning the Special Jury Prize for Editing and screened at the Cannes Film Festival Directors Fortnight. Famuyiwa is currently executive producing season 3 of The Shy for Showtime and directed 2 episodes of The Mandalorian, season 1 for Disney+. He is also developing the feature film adaptations of the graphic novel Black Hole for New Regency and Plan B, and the New York Times bestselling book Children of Blood and Bone for Lucasfilm. So excited to have you here with us.
Good to be here. Good to be back virtually to
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, how has the last couple months been for you in terms of, COVID and pandemic, like all of this changing, happening?
yeah. I mean, look, we were in an unprecedented place, just dealing with COVID and the sort of, the realities of what that was and having to deal with it and adjust with it, the quarantine. And so there was just, a mix of feelings around that,
Mhm.
just in terms of work, family, trying to be creative. And then, in the, sort of in the course of that, having this, sort of continuation of this sort of original sin of racism of our country sort of rear its head in so many ways, from Aubrey to to Central Park, and then culminating in George Floyd's murder and lynching. It was just, you know everything sort of came together in this really remarkable um, way that I'm still in the middle of processing. But it's just turned this into a moment of history that I think we're all living through, and hopefully a history that means, on all levels, we're going to start thinking about how we aren't going to go back to where we were
Mhm.
pre-March or whenever that was that we started.
Right? Were you in the middle of shooting? Like, where were you at in your projects, your creative projects when COVID hit, and how has that changed since?
Yeah, I mean, look, I was we had just finished wrapping on season 2 of Mandalorian.
Mhm.
Um, Even though I don't know if it's official that I'm back, but so we had just, so it literally was like a week before the lockdown happened. I was actually the last in the schedule. I was the last in the schedule, so I was the last to shoot. We wrapped, and then a couple, a week or so later, that's when everything started to happen. So for that, it was actually advantageous and fortunate because a lot of the post process moved to remote, which for post is a natural sort of transition into that. So there wasn't a lot of misbeats. There's certain things that we'll still have to get figured out, but for the most part it was sort of moving into a natural process. And then there were some other projects I was working on that were supposed to start prepping in the summer around this time, which obviously have been put on hold as we start to figure out what the next steps for production are.
Right.
So I was sort of, I hadn't started um, my next project and had finished shooting on the other. I sort of ended up in a good in between, and didn't have to be in a place of having to kind of shut something down in the middle, which would have been tough.
Yeah, that's at least there's a silver lining to that where you're still able to develop projects
Yeah.
and continue with projects in post production. So how has that kind of pause in your work affected your ability to have conversations about the social justice side? We're kind of being hit by two pandemics, right?
Yeah.
And social justice and inequality and systemic racism. So how has that kind of side of things affected your day to day?
Well, it's, look, I think even as we were in the middle of just dealing with quarantine and the business really slowing down and stopping, it just put me in a place of thinking about, what's important as a filmmaker and what I want to say with and how I want to use the time that you have if you're fortunate enough to make film and television. How do you want to use that time? And so I was already in that process.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking about it, and I think as the anger and sort of frustration and everything around me around George Floyd started to bundle up, it just came into sort of more of a laser focus, and it really hit me, I think, as I started to see, the sort of shows of support from, studios and networks and agencies and, all of these voices that were saying they support Black lives, they support Black artists, and they support Black art. And I just got so angry by that. I know I know it should have been one of those things where I was like, oh yeah, this is great. But at the same time, just understanding the how much the business has to change in terms of how it does things, how much, it sort of contributes, whether knowingly or not, to a lot of these ideas around white supremacy, whether it's just through, how films are cast or made and who gets the opportunities, who's, making and greenlighting films and series. So I just got to this place where I was like, okay, great. Now you've written this down on paper. Now you've said this is what your intentions are. Now it's there. There's no sort of tiptoeing around it. Well, now you have to do the work, the real work of making that happen. Now you have to really be dedicated to not just saying what you support, but actually showing what that is. And how you show it is with who you hire, who you give opportunities to, where your money goes. And so we're going to see over the next year or however long how serious they were about these commitments, because I think you're going to have a lot of people who are going to hold them to it. And I think though these conversations are happening in our business and they're happening throughout the country, but we have a sort of specific and unique role in that, filmed entertainment, no matter how it's distributed, shapes minds and shapes culture, both here and abroad. So there's a big responsibility that Hollywood has right now that I don't quite know if they're up to, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really fascinated by what you're saying about this anger, because, I mean, you've been in the industry for a really long time. Your first feature came out, in a time where, they weren't having these conversations. So do you feel like things have changed? Or do you feel like, that, people are kind of just talking the talk, as you're saying, and
Yeah.
we've yet to see actionable change?
Yeah, no, I think things have changed, and I don't know who said this, and maybe it was Chris Rock, maybe it was someone else, but I think it was something to the effect of if someone stabs you with a knife and takes it out halfway, is that progress? And so you could call that progress, and so yes, I do. I'm not going to say that things haven't changed since I started in the business and came out of USC. But I think there's always been a certain, you know, it's still been put in a certain lane. It's been put in a certain kind of, you know, a certain niche. There hasn't been, you know, sort of the ability for filmmakers on a whole, filmmakers of color to sort of have the same types of work opportunities, and particularly as we start to get into different genres of film or different budget levels. So yes, there's been, you know, progress to some extent, but I think, you know, as we're talking about as a whole, you know, incremental progress doesn't do much. It has to be, you know, sort of full bore in terms of what that means. And that means the world should reflect, the business should reflect the world that we live in. And that world is global, and that world is, you know, multicultural. And that just hasn't been what has been the focus of the business over the years, even though I think there's been an attempt at different points to address it.
Yeah. I guess what's a bit challenging about this specifically now is you were hearing from the industry, like, yes, we want to be more diverse, we want to be more inclusive. And then when coupled with, you know, COVID and the pandemic, you know, we don't know if shadowing programs will come back or people will be willing to take those risks for on, you know, unproven creators. So how, if you were coming out of USC right now, how would you feel about, you know, capitalizing on this moment of, hey, we're hiring, we wanna support you, whereas we're still in this kind of shaky time of the industry and really the whole world is kind of in this limbo.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I think for those of you who are coming out versus those of us who have a little more gray, time is on your side. And so, so and look, we are going to get back to business. That business will be changed and altered as something like this is definitely going to do. But at the same time, we're going to always have a need for storytelling, and whether that storytelling takes place and is distributed in you know, theatrically in theaters, whether it's through streaming services, whether it's, you know, on Quibi, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, we're gonna always, as a, you know, as a culture, as humans, want, you know, to see entertainment in that way. And so I don't, and the business has dealt with different upheavals over its history and different things that, you know, uh, were supposed to change the game. But and so what's changed obviously over hundreds, you know, a couple 100 years, or has been how we see our entertainment, and whether that's the, you know, television, or whether it's theaters, whether it's cable or anything else. But the need for it will always be there. So I think that, I actually think this is a very exciting moment, and it's a moment full of opportunities, because we're in a different, you know, we're in a different kind of atmosphere, and I think there are going to be a lot of people who will hold the town to task, and I think because of all of the talent that's around, that's coming out, there's no excuse to say, well, we don't know where to find, you know, we don't
Yeah.
know where to find these people, we don't know where to find this work. It's all around you, and I think it's, you know, it's really about just making the decision to do it. And so for those of us who are creating things, it's about continuing to tell your stories, because you're going to always be needed to do that. And I wouldn't let the moment discourage you. Actually, I think it's, you know, this is a true moment of disruption. I think, you know, we've heard that kind of thing, you know, in kind of corporate speak for so long that we don't really know what it is. But this is truly a moment where the business is going to change,
Mm-hmm.
and needs to speak to the now and the future. And it's an existential crisis for the business. And if they don't do it, they're just not going to survive. So it's,
Yeah, definitely. I think it's definitely been encouraging to see, at least on like Twitter and stuff, like a lot of executives saying like, hey, writers like who aren't in the WGA, like DM me, send me your script, like these kind of, you know, calls out for new stories and new perspectives.
Yeah.
So have you had those conversations with executives and, you know, when as you're developing these projects that they're trying to, you know, hire on or bring on more diverse talent, or are you just kind of focusing on?
No, I mean, look, I think that I'm trying to, in you know, my own small way to sort of contribute and open doors and give opportunities. But honestly, I think if we're just if what needs to happen is simple, but sometimes the simple things are the hardest, and it's like just hire people, you know, just you
Just
know,
hire people. You
it's
know,
really
just hire
it's
people.
really easy, you know. It's like, you know, there's so many. Again, there's no excuse because there's so many talented people out there, and whether they're coming out of USC Film School or they've just taught themselves or they're just, you know, the talent is out there, and it's easy to find. I'm always and I see it because I see how quickly and how easily this stuff happens. Every single day, you know. And so again, I think the onus really is it's on you know, the filmmakers to continue to push and be out there to tell their stories, but truly the onus is on you know, the town as a whole to say we're serious about this and we're not just going to be talking about it. Because again, I have met a myriad of talented Black and brown executives that are smart, that are talented, that do great work, and I've watched as, you know, they've sort of gone through the roller coaster of working in sort of some of these corporate environments, and be they agents at agencies or, you know, or executives at studios or networks, and they're there to be picked, to be promoted, but they're just not seen in the same way. So this is a moment to say, you know, they're actually there, and let's move these folks into positions where they can actually speak to and help speak to the new audiences that are forming now, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's fantastic. So, I mean, I think what's amazing about your work and your journey so far as a creative is just seeing how you're able to find the kind of individual point of view, starting from the wood and like your, you know, childhood home, and then going to something as big as, you know, the Mandalorian and all these big projects. How's it been for you transitioning from kind of more, you know, individualized, grounded kind of stories like The Wood and Dope to, you know, bigger productions? How has that transition been like for you on your journey?
I mean, for me, it's been fine. And here's the dirty little secret. It's all storytelling. It's all filmmaking, you know. And so the tools that you need to tell a story are contained inside of you and contained in your point of view. Everything else is just a tool that you use as a filmmaker. And so when I was making The Wood and Dope, I had a certain set of tools and a certain toolkit to work with to sort of tell my stories. And then obviously with Mandalorian, you have a complete other set of tools, but that's what they are. And I think so much of, you know, the barriers that happen between, you know, making smaller projects and the bigger ones aren't necessarily about, you know, how to handle technology or how to handle the toys. It's really just about how you're telling a story. And I think what you actually bring to those bigger projects is the sort of personal perspective, because that's what, at the end of the day, no matter what the budget or what the scale, if you don't connect to a character, if you don't connect to a story, then it doesn't work. And we've seen them. We've seen it throughout, there's countless examples of films that, have everything in terms of size, budget, and people around it, but don't know how to tell that simple story, that personal story. So that's what you're learning at USC is about, telling a story and how to use images to tell a story, and how to use words to tell a story, and how to use actors and lighting to tell a story. And so those are the things you're still going to be using at all levels. And what I found is how similar my experiences still are from what I was making, my short films at SC. There's so much of it that still is about managing people, managing time. You never have enough time to shoot. You never have enough money. There's always an actor who has questions that you know about the different things that you asking them to do. And so you're still managing all of that. Mm-hmm. It's just a lot more people, obviously, as you move
way up. Bigger, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, yeah. I guess with that transition, I don't know if this was intentional or not for you, but you're talking earlier about genre, mm-hmm. and a lot of your earlier work were more comedic and like family kind of driven, and now with your new projects that you're going into, Children of Blood and Bone and sci-fi fantasy, was that intentional, or were those the stories that just naturally, like, the ones that you gravitated towards, or mm-hmm. how did that go?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a couple things. I mean, everything starts with your personal experience as a storyteller and filmmaker. So I think, as with many filmmakers, you start from what's closest to you, and then you sort of move out from there. But for me, I grew up, sort of in the blockbuster 80s into the independent film 90s. So there's always been this love of both that I've had, and I went to USC, like many people go to USC because I grew up on these big Hollywood entertainments, but I just didn't see myself in them. I didn't see myself in those stories, and E.T. or Ghostbusters or Raiders or whatever, even though, or Star Wars, even though those were films that I loved. And so, so to me, it's, this has kind of been a kind of a culmination of certain of all the things that I've enjoyed over the years. And then it's just about personal taste, and I've never wanted to be confined by a sort of genre, or say, well, this is my genre. I'm going to be the fill in the blank guy, or that's what I do best. I've just sort of gone to what's attracted me. And so so in some respects, I look at, someone like Mike Nichols, and I see sort of the breadth of his career, and moving from comedy to drama and different things in between. And I've always felt like so much of life is filled with both, that I've never wanted to do one thing or the other. So, I'm sure there's a through line through these things somewhere, but most of it is just trying to do the things that really just, I find some sort of personal connection to.
Yeah, well, definitely, I think right, straight off the top of my head is, the casting is always from a diverse point of view, always like has that kind of focus, because when you look at Star Wars in the 80s, like, a lot of those characters didn't look like your characters in your work. So I feel like that's a pretty remarkable through line. But I do have a fangirl moment. I love these books.
Oh my goodness.
So much. Children of Blood and Bone and Children of Virtue and Vengeance.
Yes.
So when I saw that you were announced as a director, I was like, yes! I'm so excited! Because it feels like, and I don't mean to put too much pressure, but it feels like the next, like, Black Star Wars. It feels like that's the level of
Yeah.
series.
No, I read a manuscript of Children of Blood and Bone, a few years ago, or maybe like four now. I'm trying to remember. So I'd read it, and I put it down, and I was just moved. I was almost in tears, because it was just every page I would turn, it was like, here's this story it's Star Wars, it's this big mythology, it's Lord of the Rings, it's Harry Potter, but it's about Nigeria, and and these
Yeah, like when
characters.
I saw the opening map,
Yeah,
it's like, what?
yeah,
Like Lagos?
yeah,
What?
exactly,
Like,
exactly.
okay, here we go.
And so it was just this amazing moment of like, oh my God, I can't believe we're here. Tomi did such an amazing job with that book. It felt like this is it. This is the thing that I felt like my storytelling, my career was sort of building towards, both from a personal standpoint of who I am as first generation of Nigerian immigrant parents, to
Happy that
to
you're doing well. I mean,
happy I'm doing well. I'm doing
how
well.
long did it take you to convince them, like, I still make your mom and dad?
Exactly. That's why I said I showed them the pamphlet or I showed them the USC materials where it was like, it's the #1 film school. Look, it's #1.
Love degrees. I will say that. Like, they're like, oh, you're going to the #1 film school.
Exactly. So that helped. That helped a lot. So I'm excited about this. I think, and to me, I feel like this is what I mean when I say that it represents the now and the future. It's the big tentpole filmmaking, that's about it's going to look like the world, and look more like the world than it has up to this point. And it's going to be about, and the themes that run through the book. Both books are sort of about this struggle for identity, the struggle for, power, sort of the idea of people that are sort of oppressed and trying to find a voice, all sort of in this magical world that we've never seen. And so it's not based in sort of the Western traditions of fantasy and magic that I think we've, sort of seen on screen for so many times. We're going to step into a world we've never seen before, and that's exciting. But it's also going to be about and for everyone, and for everyone who can sort of connect into these ideals. And it's and it just by weird chance, in terms of how everything came together, that it actually is at Lucasfilm, and which is what created Star Wars, George Lucas, and to begin with, so that this can be the next sort of iteration of what the company is doing, and how they see the world. I think is exciting.
Yeah. Again, fangirl coming out. Can you tell us anything about where you are in the process?
We are dealing with COVID and trying to
What?
make.
Is the pandemic going on?
No, yeah, exactly. So, but yes, I'm excited about where we are. And so I can't give
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But I'm very, very excited about the project, and what it means and what it'll be. And so we're digging in, but yeah, it's challenging during this time, but everyone's completely on board, which is really exciting.
Yeah. Well, for people watching, if you haven't read Children of Blood and Bone, you are missing out. All that to say.
Go read it.
So one credit that I found so fascinating was your executive producer credit on Hassan Minaj's comedy special.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I love that special, and I'm just so fascinated as to because your work is definitely in features and TV, and when I saw a comedy special, I was like, what? How did that come about? And it seems to make sense with your first generation background, but I would love to.
Yeah, no, I met Hassan in, I was living in New York at the time, so I'd met Hassan, and we met in New York. And I think for me, it was, I connected so much to his point of view, his voice, and he sort of talked to me about, growing up and what that felt like, and growing up parent of immigrants, and so we connected on just the personal level about that experience, and so I was, a fan of his while he was on Daily Show, and so when he started to talk about the stand-up and the tour, he had asked me if I'd want to be involved, and of course I was like, I'd love to help, in any way to bring his voice out there, just because I felt like what he was saying was so needed and necessary, but also in a way that was smart and funny. And I think when you can, through humor, sort of have these conversations, they penetrate in a way that's more, it's more lasting and effective than even just sitting down and having a talk or a lecture or a TED talk or whatever about it.
Yeah.
And so his ability to use comedy in that way that felt both human, but also talking about these bigger things was really what attracted me to what he was doing. So, it's been exciting just to see that special, to see how he's sort of become, this sort of cultural icon who's sort of a truth teller as well. And so, I'll do it again if he'll have me.
Yeah, no, it was a really well done special. And so, yeah, just one of those things. And then I guess I'm also fascinated about your transition from features to television, because you also directed episodes of The Shy, Wave, and Mandalorian, of course. How has that transition been for you, coming from independent features to television?
I mean, I think now, because of what I don't know. So there's no line anymore, right, between what film is and what TV is, and I think, the types of stories that you could never tell on television, 20 years ago, are the things that you could only tell in film, are the things that now you can only tell on television and film doesn't seem to be interested in. So stories like The Shy were resonated with me, and I again, like Hassan, I've had the pleasure of meeting Lena a while ago, and just really connecting to again her point of view and her voice. And when she sent me the script and asked if I was interested, it was a no-brainer. But again, it was just, it felt it what I'm doing feels like it fits into my natural point of view. So telling that story from those different points of view about those young, particularly start around these young people and these young characters, felt, very much at home. And she's, was such a talent. I just wanted to do everything to help bring that vision alive. And then again, I don't even know if I can call Mandalorian television. It's just it's like, it's so, it's like, I don't even, it definitely rivals any big budget feature film in terms of the and then just, to be able to sort of use and work in the new technology. But I think what's great about Mandalorian is that Jon Favreau, is also started as a independent filmmaker, and Swingers was the first film he wrote and starred in. And so he has sort of he has an approach to this that I think has never forgotten that, and I think that was part of the attraction to myself and other filmmakers, was that I think he sort of understood what that brings to the table and was excited about that, and excited about those different perspectives. So because of that, I haven't felt any real transition, because it feels like I'm doing the same thing that I've been doing. And I think with both The Chi and Mandalorian, I've had the creative freedom to sort of to make it and shape it, that it doesn't feel like, it feels like each of these things are small movies. So, and I think that's how we all have to start looking at it, is that I don't think it's necessarily about the where it's distributed or how you see it. It's kind of what we call cinema now is going to have to encompass a lot of different things. So I feel like whether it's shown on TV or whether it ends up being shown theatrically, it's all, I'm looking for a certain type of cinematic experience, and if I get that, then it doesn't matter to me where it is.
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna backtrack a tiny bit to Dope, because it was so dope. I still remember when that movie came out. It was a big, like, kind of revelation for me, at least as a filmmaker, because I felt like, oh my gosh, like, this is the kind of, like, stories that I gravitate towards, that is like high quality, well made, great cast. Do you think that making Dope then or now would be easier? Like, do you think things have changed since that movie has come out in terms of the feasibility of projects? You hear all the time, like, oh, Black films don't travel, they don't sell. Do you think that conversation has changed?
Well, I mean, look, I know that the films with Black people in them travel, because I traveled with the film around the world and saw the reaction to it, and I saw how people, it was fascinating to me to watch that, the laughs hit in the same places, the certain certain things hit exactly the same, no matter whether it was, in France or in Hong Kong. So, and so that just shows that film is about a universal human experience. And if you're speaking to that, it works. But yeah, it was a challenge to get that film made then. I think, filmmaking is always a challenge, but I do think that there has been this question mark around films like that, that I think are unfair, and so and also just not borne out by facts or by real testing. So I go, well, if you're saying some of these films don't travel, well, let's test it. It was always sort of a self-fulfilling thing, like, well, they don't travel, but then you never actually try to
Yeah.
distribute them internationally. So so I would say that, again, that film was made, seat of our pants independently. It was a tiny budget, but it was just about the love and that people had for the material, and I think a lot of people saw themselves in it and wanted to get it made. And I met and worked with incredible collaborators on it, who I've continued to work with and have gone on to do some really great things on their own. But yeah, I think that kind of film can get made, and Children of Blood and Bone could get made, and everything in between, because that is what we have to speak to. This world is what we have to speak to. So challenges will always be there, as they are making anything. But I don't. It's sort of. It's dishonest and wrong to say that somehow if it looks a certain way and is populated with certain characters or made by certain people, somehow it's devalued. That's just been wrong, and I think that's the moment we're talking about now, where we're saying, no, this is the future of the business. multiculturalism is the future of the business, and you have to do it or you will die, you know?
Yeah, definitely. One more question, then we'll go to getting some great questions here. So, especially being, you know, Nigerian American first generation, what sort of advice do you have for Black creators who are starting out, especially during this time? Any sort of nuggets of wisdom you want to share, or anything you would have done differently in your journey that you'd like to share?
I mean, everyone's journey is so unique and individual. But what I will say is that, you know, one thing that has always kept me going, or to have the ability to sort of rework my career, is the ability to write, you know, and to sort of craft the script, and whether you do that yourself or you do it with a writer or a partner, being the ability to do that and to tell a story and to create a story or to find a way into a story through writing has been, you know, that's the biggest thing. That's kind of the what separates folks, and I think allows you to have more longevity. And I think why writer directors to some extent can weather a lot of things. So, you know, because at any point you can write something, and that's what happened with Dope. It'd been a while since I'd done something, and my last project wasn't one that did very well or I was necessarily the proudest of, but I had an idea and I could write it and find a way, a will, you know, to will it into existence. And so that's the part of the process that I you know, obviously we spend a lot of time talking about, and in film school we do, but it truly is the foundation of it. And then everything sort of springs from that and can be created from that. So that's one piece of advice. The second is learn about visual effects.
Very true. Why you say that?
Just because it really is, there's so many, you know, that's the one thing is like, you know, making Mandalorian and being in some of these environments, it's like so much of that is part of what storytelling is and will be. And there just aren't, there's just no one of color. There's you know, there's no women, and it's such a big part of storytelling, and the knowledge of that is really important. So, you know, I know everyone can't get into it or find it, but it's having a knowledge and a language around that, I think is going to be very helpful for anyone looking to tell stories moving forward, you know.
Very great pieces of advice. So guys, during quarantine, you got to write your scripts and take your visual effects classes.
There you go. And you can do it remotely.
What?
It's COVID proof. You can do it remotely.
Yes, very true. So we'll start with some questions. Alex, do we want to bring people in, or should I read people's questions?
Yeah, I'll invite anyone that you want to call on to come on in, and we'll, if you're camera ready out there watching this, we're gonna invite you over as a panelist, and you can turn your video on and ask your question directly. If you're not camera ready, we'll bring you over, and you can just ask your question with your video off and your microphone on.
Yeah.
And if you're not microphone ready, you can just ask us to read it out loud. So, should we start with Olga Nuku Kaminwa Joseph? Okay.
Yeah, we'll start with that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Olga Nuku. I feel like that's Nigerian too.
Yes.
I was like flexing my Yoruba because I gotta get back to it.
Hi. Sorry, I'm not camera ready, but I'm here.
Hello.
My name is not Nigerian. No, it's a combination of my two grandmothers' names, but I am from East Africa, so first generation. My question was about Children of Blood and Bone. So I'm also a fan of the book, and I'm excited to see that it's going to be turned into a movie. I wanted to hear a bit about the adaptation process and kind of what moves you're making when you have a book and you're trying to translate it to the screen, what maybe needs to be cut or needs to be added, and how collaborative that situation is with Tomi.
Yeah. Look, I've done a couple adaptations, and it's its own challenge. You know, one, it's great because you have a framework of what really works and is really amazing, but at the same time, there are things you have to be faithful to in a medium of film, which needs to be different than a book. So I find that I'm trying, you know, what we're trying to do is sort of stay true to the, you know, sort of the underlying ideas around the book, even if there might be things that change, because what you don't necessarily want the film to feel like it's just a sort of greatest hits moments for fans of the book. And so, and they're two different ways of telling stories. Tomi could tell this story from 3 different voices, you know, and multiple voices at different times, where we're inside their heads and thoughts and know all their motivations at all times. When you're having to translate that to film, it's about how do you visualize these motivations? How do you get that internal dialogue between 2 characters, and make you feel it in the same way that you did when you read it on the page? And so, so that's been the process. And the book it's a big book, you know, and there's a lot that goes on. And so some of it is just sort of, you know, being faithful to having enough time to really develop the characters, and not necessarily feeling like you're going from one big action set piece to the next. And to answer the question, it's been, you know, a real collaborative process with Tomi. And so I think having her point of view and perspective has been great, but she's also been great to say, you know, this is yours at this point, and you're the, you know, you're the captain now. And so, you know.
In the most friendly way possible.
Exactly. But I'm excited. We're very close, and so I feel great.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see what happens. So
yeah, cool.
Thank you so much for answering my question.
No, thank you.
Okay. What do you think? Should we go to alumna Mel Orpin?
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
Okay, Mel, bringing you over.
Hi there.
Hey, how's it going?
Thanks so much for being here today. I'm a big fan of your career, and it's really a pleasure to get to see you in person. And hi, Tayo, nice to see you too.
Hi, Mel.
Thank you.
So what I had wanted to ask is, I was really fascinated to see that you had both written an episode of The Mandalorian and also directed it. And we hear a lot of school about how, especially when you get into the episodic process, although I know The Mandalorian is more of a hybrid, that like writing and being in a room with the creators, other people in the room, can be like very intense. And yet the directing process, especially when you have visual effects, can be so intense in terms of prep. And I was just wondering if you can talk about how that was different from maybe some of your other experiences where those are a little bit more separate, and just what your general process experience was like, how you sort of found the best of both worlds and made them work together. I hope that makes sense as a question.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, look, and the answer might not be as satisfying, because I think what's been great about Mandalorian is that it really is not a sort of traditional network or even cable television experience where there's a writer's room, or, you know, an episodic director comes in for, you know, 4 days of prep and shoots for a week, and then, you know, delivers a 2-day, you know, or few day director's cut and then leaves. It truly is a film-like process. And so, you know, so even on episode 2, which I didn't write the script, there was a lot of script work that I I sort of, working with John and in concert with John, we talked about and sort of expanding out and doing different things. But he really was, was like, here, these individual episodes are going to reflect the filmmakers, and he sort of had a through line in that he wrote most of the episodes, but it really was sort of individualized in that way. And so by the time we got to 6, John knew that the script needed work and just said, hey, would you be interested in coming in and doing a rewrite on it? And so that became, again, more like a film process, where I went and I did a draft, and we sort of talked it through. But it was it was a very, again, feature film like process. And so in that respect, like I was saying before, it wasn't much of a transition, and I didn't necessarily feel like, it was about trying to come in as an episodic director and figure out how to navigate the world. It really was sort of, I had my world here, Deborah had her world, Taika had his world, and we were all working together in this new technology. So there was a lot of conversations going on. So it was almost, it was a similar sort of to a film school type environment, in that, even though we were all working on our individual episodes, because of this new technology we were all new to, including John, we were all collaborative in a way that was really exciting. And then when it came to The Shy, it was a pilot. So again, it was a similar kind of experience, where you're there sort of shaping the point of view of the show. And so, I wasn't coming in later to sort of to reinterpret what someone had already done. So I think in both these cases, being a part of the creation and birth of the series is what made it feel like, it was super collaborative. And so it made it exciting to be a part of for both shows.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. Nice meeting you.
No, nice to meet you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mel. So next, I think we're going to go to Tine. Sorry if I'm saying it wrong. I know how important names are.
Yes.
All right.
So Tane's now on our side as a panelist.
Yes.
Hi, it's Tine.
Tine.
Nice to meet you. Yes.
Tine.
So I have 2 questions, but one of my first questions was, what did you do to survive in between your directing jobs while being creative?
Right. I mean, I think that was as I was saying, that was such a big part of my world, is that I've always been a writer. I've always written my stuff, and I've always had different things at different, stages of development. So some of these projects didn't get made, or got close and didn't, but that was sort of how I was able to kind of maintain in between directing. And I think had I not had that, I probably would have had to make different choices. And even with that, you're still forced to make certain choices about projects and things you're going to do. And so, that was the main thing for me, was the ability to write. I didn't do commercials, I sort of continued to figure out the projects, both film and television, that I was writing and trying to get on the air or get on, get into the can.
Okay. And then my second question is, what would you say is some of your key things that you do in your process when it comes to directing film or television? Like, is there rituals that you do or traditions that you do?
I think, I don't know. It's because I write and direct, I have to sort of find ways of getting my self out of being a writer and into being a director, because I think that that's, directing is about sort of communicating those things on the page or what might be in my head. And obviously as a writer, I already know those things. So what I like to do is sort of visualize. I grew up playing sports, and sort of visualization about games and different kind of things or something that I used to do. And so I like to, when I finish a script, sit it down for a while, and then I pick it up and I try to visualize the audience environment, me just as an audience member going to a movie. And so in my mind, I do all the rituals. I go to the popcorn, I do everything. I get my ticket, I sit down, I watch the previews. And because I'm trying to just get myself into a mindset of, okay, I'm going to completely divorce myself of the experience of writing and now just look at it as an audience member. And so when I do that, I start to think of it as a real thing, and I start to go, okay, here's the things that I thought were working, but it's just because I'm holding on to something. Here are things that are actually working. I try to do my best to sort of put myself in the seat and watch my movie. So that's the biggest ritual I do, because I try to be as honest as I can in that moment, because then I go back to the script or go back to the process and sort of know how I want to start attacking some of these things as a director. But you have to find a way, especially if you're a writer director, of kind of separating those two disciplines.
Great, thank you so much, Rick.
No problem.
Thanks, Nate. So I know we're approaching the hour mark here. Are you good for maybe 2 more questions?
I'm good to go.
Okay. Let's bring on David Wilner.
Hi, Rick.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, thank you. I was just wondering what advice can you give us? Like, what did you learn at USC that you brought into, I guess, the quote unquote real world of filmmaking?
I'd say just about everything from, honestly. I mean, because I was in production, and it was critical studies then. I guess it's called cinema media studies now. So I did a double major. So I was watching a ton of film and sort of thinking about film while I was also making movies. So it was, and I didn't have any experience or major experience making movies before that, even though creatively movies were, things that I loved. So and as I said, the experiences and kind of what I've learned at film school are in the kind of foundations of both, the relationships you have to form, how you have to sort of put a film together, how you have to sort of organize your thoughts around a day, are all things I still do now. And so, and you just reinforce it each film and each project that you make. But, it really is surprising to me, again, how much of the process remains the same, even at a sort of a higher budget level. It's more of the same thing, basically. And so, but that was, but if I was going to get, more specific about it, it's really about I have learned that the people you are with and creating with and at film school now become the people you continue to create with moving forward on many different levels. And so I find that it truly is that experience of the people that I met at USC that I, still run into to this day that shaped me as a filmmaker. And I always think of so many there were so many talented filmmakers that I felt were way more talented than I was. You know, who haven't done stuff, and vice versa. So, but it truly is a special moment, what I got from USC, and I know, and what you guys are getting as well.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome.
Okay, great. Thanks, David. Next we have Adeza Ifeanyiwa. I'm pretty sure I said it right, I hope.
You're on our side of things.
Oh,
Okay,
there we go.
You're muted. Sorry, we can't hear you. I can answer or ask your question for you if you're having troubles as well.
I can also try and unmute you. Hang on a second. See if something popped up there.
All right, there we go. We still can't hear you, sorry. I can ask your question for you, is that good? Okay. So with regards to casting, is there anything in particular you look for when constructing a cast?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't, when I write or I'm thinking about cast, or thinking about my film, I'm not necessarily thinking about individual actors when I'm writing. I sort of have there are images in my mind of the people and who they are that I sort of take into the casting process. And so it becomes this, this process of trying to find the people who fit the people in my mind. And so, but at the same time, being open to being surprised, and not necessarily just sticking firm to that. And so I can tell you on every film I've cast, and particularly with Dope, there were characters, particularly Diggy, who Kiersey Clemens played, who I had in my mind a completely different kind of person and approach and look, and she came into an audition and just did something with the words that just was surprising to me and real, and even though it sort of went against what I was imagining, it felt exactly right for what it was. And so I think it's that combination of both, being very specific about the things you're thinking about, but also being very open to being surprised, because I've found that oftentimes you find some great things out of that. But then when it came to, say, Malcolm, I was very specific and would not let it go until I found exactly who that was. And so you sort of pick and choose and balance the moments where you feel like this absolutely has to be what was in my head, and other times where you go, okay, I'm going to be more open. But and then once you start to do that, you bring people together and see what chemistry is, and especially when it's ensemble type stuff. But that's kind of my process, and every director kind of has a different way of going into it, but that's how I do it. Mm-hmm.
Great.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we have some more questions, but I want to respect your time. So
we can take a couple more.
Okay, let's take Ifeanyi Ezieme. I just love her question, so you'll see why when she comes. I hope she or he, yeah, it's he.
Oh.
Or however you identify gender-wise. Sorry for assuming.
Hi, my name is Ifeanyi Ezieme. Nice to meet you, Rick. It's such an honor to be talking to you right now. I remember when I saw Dope in movie theaters, I walked out connecting to Malcolm so much, and I kind of felt like that's almost what it was like to be like a Nigerian in America, essentially. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if much of our experience or how much of it has changed from when you were growing up, but like when you go through your creative process and you're writing your characters and you're coming from experience, how do you design like character, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, how do you design characters where you're staying true to your identity, while also trying to make sure that you're making something that is relatable to a lot of people?
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you had this experience growing up as a Nigerian American, but there were times where, you know, obviously my parents want me to talk very proper and do well in school and, you know, very strict and stuff. So my voice at times was too quote unquote white for the Black kids, but my skin was too dark for the white kids. So I was always kind of in this in-between state of trying to figure out my identity, and moving throughout different groups and figuring out that I can be pretty cohesive in different types of groups. So I don't know if you had a similar experience being Nigerian, but like when you design your characters and try and write stories, like what does that process look like?
Yeah, well, look, I think that's experience is exactly what I think makes my point of view what it is that when you're you know, either first generation, whether it's Nigerian or not, there's always this sort of duality of both, you know, sort of the world your parents came from versus the world you live in. And then there's also when you talk about being Black in America, what that means, and not, you know, on one level having a shared experience, but then on another level, not having the history, at least within your own family, that's shared. So that sort of feeling like you're in different places and in between different worlds has always been where my point of view is, and I think for me it's always allowed me to kind of jump in and out of in my mind, in and out of different situations and have different perspectives on it, because I was able to, you know, look at what being American meant, both from, you know, being one myself, but also the idea of what that was to my parents, which was very different, and what they felt about that, having actually immigrated to this country, and me being, you know, living it as one, but also where my, you know, sort of background was different. So I think, you know, that's always been my point of view, is that, look, you know, there are multiple ways to sort of see the world. And that was a big part of Dope, was what are the perspectives that you're looking at? And so for me, like you know, I was called geeky for a lot of different things, that if I lived in a different environment, you know, riding a skateboard and it wasn't considered it wasn't geeky. That's just what everyone did, you know. But growing up in Inglewood, doing that in the, you know, late 80s, that was kind of a that was a different kind of experience. And so, you know, so to answer the first part of the question, it's, you know, you sort of start when you're talking about a character from sort of a place of personal experience, especially if it's like Malcolm or in Dope, or Mike from the Wood, which were these characters that were sort of based and shaped on me. But at the same time, I always go, that's not me. These are characters, and they have to sort of live and service the film. So something might have happened in real life that wasn't exactly what happened in the film, or I might take a portion of something and you know, sort of grow it out into a different kind of experience. But the core of it always comes from some piece of me in it, but also having, you know, again, that ability to go, it's not about staying true to me, but about staying true to the character. So Malcolm, while has a lot of characteristics that I think were similar to me, is his own person and has to live in that world and that environment with his family and his friends. And so as I'm writing, I can start from that place and take it on from there. So, you know, which is always the challenge for those of us who sort of use our own autobiography as the foundation of our work, is sort of, you know, being comfortable doing that, but also knowing that you can't be so faithful to that you ignore storytelling in the process, because a lot of things that might be very cool or funny to you might not necessarily translate. But that being said, I've also found that, making character, particularly Malcolm's character, so specific and so, about, having that name, Malcolm Adekambe, be sort of who he is. I don't know how many people have come to me from all different walks of life who go, oh my God, that is exactly like me, because I think when you get that specific, it actually becomes more universal than trying to sort of water it down and say, well, let me do the thing that feels like it's going to fit into, what people are expecting.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Those are incredible answers. Yeah, I'm just so honored to be talking to you right now.
I love that in the background.
Oh yeah,
I see that.
Oh my gosh, I see that. That's awesome. Great. Okay, we'll take one more question.
Okay.
And then, this will be our last question. Let's go with Kennedy Smith Kutila. Will you be able to join us? If not, I can read the question. But
Hello.
Hello.
It's Katella, by the way, but thank you for trying, because most people don't even try, they just ignore it. So thank you.
No.
Hi, Rick. Thanks so much for being here today.
No.
I just heard about your most recent project, Sade, that's been announced, and I'm so excited about it. I know it's in the early stages, so you might not be able to talk a lot about it, but I'm curious as to how the project came about and how you got involved with it.
Yeah, no, that's another one I'm developing over a Disney live action and very excited about. And look, that I think becomes sort of what we were talking about earlier about access and opportunity. In that case, there's an executive that was at Disney and now at Netflix, Tendo Naganda, who is from Uganda, but he connected, obviously, as also the experience of being a first generation. And so he was sort of a high up level executive there who was able to sort of say, hey, Disney, we need to be telling this kind of story. And if we're talking about Disney princesses and what that means and how that looks, then we have to expand that outside of just, our traditional spaces. And so he was very instrumental in saying, this is something we need to get done over here. And we met and we talked about, a writer that I knew, Ola Shakumbi, who also, so was Nigerian, sort of had this idea about this princess story. And we went in and talked about it and they said, let's go. And so, again, it's one of those things where maybe it would have still happened anyway, but the path towards making it happen was so much more easier because there was someone in a position of power who could understand the material and had a desire, and then was able to connect with other people who were working in the business, who both as a writer and a director, he could bring together and say, let's talk about this. And that is how the process works. That's how film happens on all different levels. It's those, it's the friends you made at USC that you go, oh, okay, now that I'm running the TV department at Universal, come on in and help tell your stories. That's part of the process that happens so often, but just that we just haven't had the access to, and that's where I see things have been changing over the past decade or so, and I think will just explode even more as we start to move forward. But so again, I think Disney has even with their troubled history in terms of representation.
Right.
In the past, I think has been a company that has been at least doing more than just talking about sort of doing some of these things. So that's how that came together. And And again, I hope to, you know, I hope it in everything I'm trying to juggle, and I can also get that one going relatively soon too.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Best of luck on the project.
No, thank you. That's good.
That sounds amazing. I didn't even know about that.
Yeah.
So excited. It sounds awesome.
Yeah. Well, that seems like a great way to end things off. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your experiences with us. And I can definitely speak for myself and hopefully everyone else that I feel so rejuvenated and encouraged by this conversation, especially as, you know, a young Black creative person. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Good to be back. Hang in there.
Stay safe, wear a mask.
Stay safe, wear a mask. Yeah, exactly.
Call your senators, fight white supremacy.
Vote. So.
And thank you, Tayo. I think that
thank you.
I think you did a great job as always, and I can't wait for us to do the old guard in a couple of weeks together.
Oh man!
Yeah, I mean, talk about scale. Yeah, that's gonna be
tune
exciting.
in for that.
Yeah.
Gina.
Yes, Gina.
And I also wanted to just quickly have
the other. She's from that other school, though.
Oh, yeah.
That other school, which shall not be named, but.
I just also wanted to welcome back Evan and Dean Daly. I think Evan's going to say a little bit about our next diversity event.
Yeah, so tomorrow night, we're going to be talking with Erin Rashawn Thomas, and that's going to be moderated by Derek Garlington. So we're really excited for that. I'm going to take over the hosting duties from Alex tomorrow. So hopefully I'll be more camera ready than I was for this intro. So I apologize for that. Thank you.
Oh, you look quite camera ready, Evan. And I just want to say, Rick, thank you so much. This was really wonderful. It's always good to see you, but it's a real treat to get to see you with all of these other folks and hear your wonderful answers. And Tao, as usual, you did a great job, and we just love having you moderate. So on to the next one. Rick, good luck with everything, and stay close. We love having you with us.
We'll do, and anytime. Good luck on everything, especially moving forward this semester. But and thank you for always reaching out.
Take care.
All
Stay
right,
safe.
take care, guys.
Great night.
Good.